So why does $1 trillion look like a drop in the ocean? Think about it for a second. Every single year, just mountains of foreign aid pour into developing nations.
Right. It crosses oceans, lands on the continent, and then poof.
Exactly. It inexplicably vanishes.
Mm.
And, if you followed international development at all, you've probably felt that sheer frustration. You see these massive headlines about billions pledged, but the needle on global poverty, it barely twitches.
It is, it's the great vanishing act of the modern world, and the assumption most of us make is that the answers are, well, loud and
The
obvious.
cinematic stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. The dramatic movie villain stuff, we think warlords intercepting the money or corrupt dictators siphoning funds into offshore accounts.
We're just like brutal geography washing away newly built roads in a monsoon.
Right, but today's deep dive is going to completely rip that assumption apart. Because the real reason aid fails isn't hiding in a jungle camp.
No, it's not.
It's hiding in plain sight. Inside the incredibly mundane, day-to-day administrative machinery of local governments.
Which is wild. So we're unpacking a groundbreaking working paper today from the National Bureau of Economic Research. It's by economists Emilie Caldeira, Marshall Foucault, and Grégoire Rota-Graziosi. And their mission, what they found, is just mind-blowing.
It really is a face slapper of a paper. They looked at 77 communes in the West African nation of Benin, specifically between 2002 and 2008.
But we need to stress this right up front. This isn't just some niche paper about African microeconomics.
Oh, absolutely not. This is about the invisible gravity of power. It's about how human behavior completely breaks our most elegant, perfect economic models.
I love that framing. Because for 20 years, global elites sold the world this, miracle cure for poverty.
The ultimate medicine.
Yeah, pushed by the World Bank, global superpowers, basically everyone. And they called it decentralization.
And, the logic behind decentralization was incredibly seductive. The central governments in many developing countries were failing, right? They were bloated, inefficient, often totally corrupt.
They just couldn't manage their own vast territories.
Exactly. So the Western institutions came up with this foolproof solution. Just cut the central government out of the loop, give the power and the money directly to local mayors and local councils.
It's almost like corporate franchising. Instead of running every tiny detail from a bloated headquarters, you just give autonomy to the local branch managers.
Right. The economists called this the proximity principle.
Which sounds so warm and democratic, right? Like, move the officials closer to the peasants, and the officials will actually know what the village needs.
It's theoretical perfection. In a nice, air-conditioned boardroom in Washington, D.C., that spreadsheet looks absolutely flawless. You put the power in the village, accountability goes up, poverty vanishes.
But the data from Benin rips that warm, fuzzy mask right off.
It really does. The reality these economists uncovered is infinitely crueler than the textbook theory. The medicine actually mutated the disease.
Which brings us to this massive clash between academic arrogance and ground-level reality. Because the smartest people in the world built these models, but they seemingly forgot what starvation actually means.
They did. They applied Western theories to an environment where those theories literally cannot survive.
Right, so in rich countries, local governments compete for your tax dollars, right?
Yeah.
By building better parks or schools.
Yeah, economists call this voting with your feet. If your town raises taxes too high or the schools are terrible, you just pack up a U-Haul and move to the town next door.
It assumes this highly competitive marketplace of local governance.
But top scholars looked at extreme poverty in Africa and made this massive, almost condescending assumption.
They figured, well, they're too poor for that.
Exactly. They assumed that in the suffocating poverty of a place like Benin, this kind of sophisticated political competition couldn't possibly exist.
They thought extreme poverty reduced humans strictly to survival mode. Like, if you are starving, you aren't exactly sitting around comparing the local tax policies of the neighboring village.
And that is where the data from Caldeira and her team proves them dead wrong.
The brutal game of political chess never stops.
It never stops. It doesn't pause for poverty. It just takes on a much more desperate form.
So let's actually look at the numbers. Because, and I mean that they will make you physically uncomfortable.
Yeah, we need to understand the abyss of extreme poverty we are dealing with here.
So zooming in on Benin, 2002 to 2008, there are 77 communes. Think of a commune like a county or a large municipality, maybe 90,000 people on average.
And the poorest of these places like Basila, Kobli, Kandi, Karimama, these are areas almost completely cut off from wealth. No paved roads, no consistent basic services.
Right, mostly subsistence agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And the financial statistics, I have to read this because it's staggering.
Right.
For the absolute poorest communes, the annual per capita resources, so the local government's entire budget divided by the number of citizens.
Right.
It was between 31 cents and $1.58.
A year.
A year. A local government's entire annual budget per person couldn't even buy you a single cup of cheap coffee.
To put that in perspective, in 2007, the commune of Lalo had a total budget of about $15,000. That is for the entire commune of tens of thousands of people. Meanwhile, the capital city, Cotonou, had a budget roughly 1,000 times higher.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there, because you're telling me a town with an annual budget of $15,000, which is barely enough to buy a used car, is actively engaged in geopolitical game theory with the town next door.
Yes.
How does that even work? When people are just trying to survive, how can governance even exist, let alone strategic competition?
And that is the exact counterintuitive reality the researchers uncovered. Starving governments don't sit still. They copy each other.
Okay, unpack that.
So the paper calls this strategic complementarity. But without the academic jargon, what they found by tracking the financial data is basically an invisible contagion of spending.
A contagion. So the researchers found this mathematical rule, right? If a neighboring town somehow increases its public spending by 10%,
the local town will miraculously scrape together funds to increase its own spending by 6.2%.
it's like keeping up with the Joneses, but the Joneses live in a dust bowl.
It completely defies our basic logic. You have a budget of 31 cents a person. Your neighbor spends a little more on a public project, and suddenly you find a way to spend more too.
But how? Where does a town with a $15,000 budget physically find the money to increase spending by 6%? They can't issue municipal bonds on Wall Street?
No, they don't print money, they squeeze.
Please.
When we say they increase spending, they are aggressively leaning on whatever tiny levers of autonomy they have.
Like what?
Sending local enforcers to the village market to squeeze vendors for higher daily stall fees,
Okay.
or increasing informal tolls on the single dirt road passing through town.
Oh, wow. So they just extract it from the poorest people.
Or they just shift money away from essential invisible maintenance, like, say, paying the local school teacher's salary, and divert it into highly visible, cheap vanity projects.
Like a new welcome sign or painting a municipal building.
Exactly, just to show activity.
But why? If they're so poor, why do they feel this overwhelming pressure to compete?
Because in a decentralized system, survival depends entirely on perception. If your neighbor spends money and you don't, you look weak.
You look incompetent.
Right, to your constituents, but more importantly, you look useless to the central political bosses in the capital. It's a forced pressure of the political ecosystem. If your neighbor spends, you must spend or you die politically.
It's literally a virus. But here is where the data rips open an even deeper, crazier layer. We assume this mimicry happens across physical borders, right?
Okay.
Town A borders Town B, so they copy each other.
Right, geographical spillover.
But the researchers found that geography is actually a lie.
Mm.
True power doesn't just care about borders on a map. True power travels through bloodlines.
This was one of the most remarkable parts of their methodology. They didn't just look at a map of physical borders. They overlaid a map of human identity.
Because Benin is incredibly diverse.
Very much so. 42 recorded ethnic groups. You have the Fon and the Aja heavily concentrated in the south, the Bariba and Samba in the north, the Yoruba in the southeast. It's a complex mosaic.
So the researchers asked this wild question. What if two towns do not share a border? What if they are separated by, like, 100 miles of rough terrain, but they share the same dominant ethnic identity?
Do they still copy each other's financial behavior?
Right, and the data proves they absolutely do. Their spending moves together in statistical lockstep.
The exact number is a 5.1% spending increase triggered purely by ethnic kinship across vast physical distances.
That is insane to me. The political game completely transcends the physical map. The lines drawn by bureaucrats don't matter as much as the ethnic bloodline. That dictates the cash flow.
It does.
But how does that actually work in practice? Why would a Fon mayor in one district care about the budget of a Fon mayor 100 miles away?
Because they belong to the same national ethnic power bloc. In many of these developing democracies, political parties are heavily organized along ethnic lines.
Okay, so it's a faction.
Exactly. If a prominent mayor from your ethnic group is executing highly visible public works projects, it raises the standard for everyone in that specific ethnic political network.
You are competing for prominence within your own identity group's hierarchy.
Yes, trying to prove you are an effective leader who deserves future promotion or national funding. The pressure is transmitted through the ethnic network, completely bypassing physical geography.
That paints a picture of a fiercely competitive, almost cutthroat environment.
Hmm.
But, you'd be wrong to think everyone gets to play this game.
Well, absolutely. There is a hidden velvet rope here.
Right, this isn't some democratic free-for-all where every struggling town gets to participate. It is a class-based blood sport.
The research highlights this brutal, unforgiving threshold based on fiscal autonomy. We touched on this, the ability of a town to generate its own local tax base.
Market stall licenses, trade fees, that kind of thing.
Right. It might be a microscopic amount of money, but it is theirs to control.
And the data shows that only the towns with this fiscal autonomy react to their neighbors. Only they catch the spending contagion.
Because they have levers to pull.
Exactly. So what happens to the towns that have nothing? The ones that are 100% reliant on the central government for every single penny.
They are utterly paralyzed. The statistical models show zero interaction, no strategic movement, nothing.
They can't squeeze a market that doesn't exist.
Precisely. It is intensely cruel when you step back and look at it. Decentralization was sold by global elites as this great equalizer, right?
A way to empower everyone.
But instead, it created an invisible wall, a two-tiered system of poverty. The slightly poor get to play politics, they get to have agency.
And the absolutely destitute are stripped of all agency. They're just ghost towns in the political machine.
Now you might be thinking, well, even if it is unequal, at least these towns are increasing their public spending. Maybe this contagion is actually good for the people.
But if we follow the money, it doesn't lead to the people. It leads straight to the ballot box.
It really does. This brings us to the profound hypocrisy of the whole political cycle. Because the researchers didn't just look at geography and ethnicity, they looked at the timeline.
Right, Benin held highly contested local elections in 2003 and again in 2008.
And if these local mayors are basically bankrupting their towns just to copy their neighbors, there has to be an endgame.
They aren't doing this for fun.
Exactly. When we look at the timeline around these elections, the motive finally clicks into place. The data shows this terrifying mechanical precision.
What happens?
In the year exactly prior to an election, public spending violently explodes. Politicians suddenly find the money, they initiate road repairs, they break ground on clinics, they hand out contracts.
They are quite literally buying love.
Yes, demonstrating their capability to outbuild the mayor next door. The spending contagion reaches its absolute peak right before the voters go to the polls.
And then?
Yeah.
The election happens, the votes are counted. What does the data show for the year immediately following the election?
The funds evaporate instantly.
Just a cliff drop.
Massive, ruthless cuts across the board. Projects are left half-finished. The money is just gone.
It perfectly proves that this spending contagion has absolutely nothing to do with building better lives for citizens.
Nothing at all. It is a cold, calculated mathematical formula for regime survival. The local leaders are playing their own population.
And the rabbit hole goes even deeper. Because in this decentralized system, the local mayor isn't really the boss.
No, he's just a tentacle of the president.
The researchers mapped out this center-periphery network. The web of power goes all the way from the dusty dirt roads straight to the presidential palace in Cotonou.
Right. During the period studied, Benin transitioned between President Mathieu Kérékou and President Boni Yayi. Different bases of power, different ethnic alliances.
And the economists included a variable for partisan affiliation. They wanted to know, what happens if the local mayor belongs to the exact same political party as the sitting president?
The results are striking. If the mayor is in the president's party, their town receives a massive targeted injection of public spending directly from the central government.
Just a stark, measurable reward for loyalty. But wait, decentralization was supposed to destroy this exact kind of old boys club.
That was the pitch. Yeah. Cut out the corrupt central government, give power to the people.
But it didn't do that at all.
No, decentralization didn't break the elite. It just made them smarter and stealthier. The central government simply adapted to the new rules.
How so?
Instead of managing the corruption from a single, highly visible central office, they used the newly created local administrative structures as underground distribution nodes.
For patronage?
Exactly. It disguised centralized corruption as local grassroots democracy. The central bosses still pull the strings, they just fund the local franchisees who fall in line.
So the West's favorite economic theories literally die in the African dirt,
They do. Let's revisit that tie-bout model we talked about earlier, voting with your feet.
where citizens theoretically move to a neighboring town if the mayor builds a better water well.
The data from Benin exposes that as a complete hallucination. The researchers looked closely at the internal migration data. If the Western model was real, you would see people moving laterally.
Right, a family packing up and moving to the small rural town just across the border, chasing better local governance.
But they aren't doing that at all. The demographics show they are fleeing the rural areas en masse. They are running for their lives to the massive urban centers.
Look at the data. The massive urban sprawl of Ebonyi Calavi was growing at an insane 9.44% a year. Meanwhile, a struggling rural commune like Bukumbe was stagnating at a microscopic 0.41% growth.
People in extreme poverty move to survive. They move to find a wage-paying job, to escape agricultural collapse.
They do not uproot their entire lives to critique a local mayor's minor fiscal policy adjustments.
Exactly. The perfect Western model of bottom-up citizen supervision shatters upon contact with actual starvation. You cannot vote with your feet if you can't afford shoes.
But classical economists always have a backup theory. They argue, okay, maybe the poorest citizens can't physically move, but surely they will use the ballot box to punish bad behavior.
Right. This is known as yardstick competition.
The theory is that a voter looks over the fence, sees the next town has a newly paved road, sees their own town is full of potholes, and they vote their useless mayor out of office.
It sounds totally rational, a foolproof mechanism for democratic accountability.
But again, the math grinds this fantasy to dust. The researchers explicitly tested for this. Do voters actually punish officials based on neighborly comparisons?
And the statistical effect. It is microscopic. It barely registers in the data. The yardstick illusion completely falls apart in practice.
We have to ask why. Why doesn't the Western democratic mechanism work here?
Because you can't just copy-paste a democratic institution into an entirely different world and expect it to function without its supporting infrastructure.
We need a transparent press.
Exactly. In the West, yardstick competition relies on an aggressive local press to report the facts and compare budgets. It relies on an educated middle class that has the time to hold leaders accountable.
And without those things, a ballot box is just a useless wooden cube. It is an empty ritual. The voters simply don't have the reliable information needed to make an accurate comparison.
And honestly, even if they did have a perfect spreadsheet of municipal spending, the deep ethnic ties and the reliance on national patronage networks override the cold logic of public service delivery.
Identity beats infrastructure. Every single time.
So far, this paints a rather bleak picture, doesn't it? A rigged game where the poorest are excluded, democratic mechanisms hollowed out by patronage.
But there's a twist in the data. Buried in this bleak mathematical model is a hidden superpower.
There is. What if we can weaponize this selfish behavior?
What if we can take this flawed human algorithm and use it to actually help people?
This brings us to the concept of the social multiplier. We know, as a statistical fact from this study, that towns will blindly copy their neighbors' spending, that 6.2% contagion rate.
They will scrape and claw to find money if they see the town next door spending.
So think about what that means for how we distribute foreign aid. For decades, the strategy has been to spread aid thinly and evenly across a whole country, trying to be fair.
But what if we change the game? What if you drop a highly targeted, massive foreign aid package into just one single town?
It's like dropping a single match into a dry forest.
Yeah.
By fully funding one town, you radically, artificially increase their public spending. They build the new clinic. They pave the roads.
And because of the ironclad rule of strategic complementarity,
You force all the surrounding towns to magically find money to compete.
they panic. Their mayors look at the sudden wealth next door and realize they will lose the next election if they don't keep up.
So they aggressively scrape their own budgets, they crack down on local tax collection, and they increase their own spending without receiving a single dime of the foreign aid.
It is brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
One localized drop of external aid can violently ignite a funding chain reaction across a whole region.
You get a massive multiplier effect. You effectively get more development for less foreign money.
You are basically using their own corrupt, competitive survival instincts against them. You trick the political system into developing itself.
It sounds like the ultimate hack for international development.
It does.
But game theory issues a brutal, sobering warning here. Strategic complementarity guarantees what economists call multiple equilibria.
Meaning it can go more than one way. It is a razor's edge.
Precisely. Because this system is deeply interconnected, pulling the lever of decentralization or injecting targeted aid can trigger a beautiful upward spiral. Everyone competes to be better.
But it can just as easily trigger a synchronized death spiral, a race to the bottom.
Right. In a downward spiral, instead of competing to build better schools, everyone wastes their tiny, precious resources on useless vanity projects just to keep up with the neighbor's vanity project.
You build a useless stadium because the guy next door built a useless monument?
The funds are depleted, no actual productive capacity is created, and everyone starves together.
So the beautiful spreadsheets built in air-conditioned Washington, D.C. offices become a blind, terrifying casino gamble when they are actually deployed in reality.
Exactly. You pull the lever of decentralization, and you honestly have no idea if you are triggering an economic boom or a competitive suicide pact among the poorest people on Earth.
And this is where we really need to elevate this entire deep dive, because it is very easy to listen to this and think of it as a distant tragedy,
Yeah.
like all those poor towns in Benin.
But do not pity Benin.
No, you are living in the exact same trap.
This NBER paper is not just a niche African microeconomics study. What Caldeira, Foucault, and Rota-Graziosi have documented is the source code of the modern world.
The exact same dynamics are playing out all around us, just with more zeros on the price tags.
Look at the Silicon Valley AI arms race right now. You have tech giants burning billions upon billions of dollars on compute power and data centers.
Are they doing it because they have a perfect, safe business model mapped out? Are they doing it because it is strictly necessary right this second?
No, they are doing it because the company next door is doing it.
It is strategic complementarity at the highest level of global capitalism.
If Google drops a new model, OpenAI is forced to react. If Microsoft invests billions, Amazon must find the money to match it.
They're squeezing their own resources, laying off staff in other departments, just to fund the vanity project of the AI arms race so they don't look weak to their investors.
And look at the tariff wars between global superpowers. One nation raises taxes on imported electric vehicles to protect a domestic industry.
The other nation doesn't just sit there. They are forced to retaliate with their own tariffs on agricultural goods. It's a contagion of protectionism.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the tech billionaires and the world leaders are acting exactly like the starving local mayors in Benin.
The budgets are astronomically bigger, the suits are nicer, the press releases are more polished.
But the underlying human algorithm is absolutely identical.
Externalities mean no one is safe. If your neighbor makes a move, you are forced to react. We are all trapped in a blind frenzy of strategic complementarity.
Dragged forward by a current we refuse to acknowledge. We like to think we are making rational, independent choices based on objective data.
But we aren't. We are just reacting to the map, reacting to the bloodline, reacting to the neighbor.
Beautiful foreign prescriptions and elegant economic models will never completely cure the deep, agonizing wounds of developing nations for the exact same reason that they fail to predict the irrational behavior of tech markets.
Because institutions can never escape the dark gravity of human nature.
You can change the laws. You can draw new administrative borders on a map. You can mandate decentralization.
But the fundamental human instinct to dominate, to survive, to copy the person next to you so you don't get left behind, that never changes.
The 77 struggling towns of Benin are not an anomaly. They are a perfect miniature mirror.
A mirror of global capital, a mirror of human empires, a mirror of the very society you live in.
Exactly.
So as technology explodes, as global supply chains restructure, and as our own society tears itself apart over political and cultural divisions, look around you. Look at your own local government. Look at the partisan spending in your own nation. Are we really so advanced? Or are we just repeating the history of Benin on a global scale,